Hi, Yali.
Hi, Iris. Hi, Ariel, and hi, Mia. Mia is in Oslo, Norway, and Ariel is in Berlin, Germany. And we are here to talk about dance in the aftermath of October 7th and the war that has been going on in Israel since then. And we are interested in your perspective as artists who Jewish or Israeli or people with Israeli identity who work abroad. So we would like to start from an introduction, a small and short introduction of yourselves, who you are and what are you doing generally as artists. And then we will go from there to October 7th and on.
So actually, as you said, I'm based in Norway, and for Rosh Hashanah last year, I took my family, my daughter and my partner to Israel, and straight from Israel actually into a cave for Yom Kippur. I spent all of Yom Kippur alone in a cave in the center of Norway, an old cave with the oldest cave paintings we have in Norway. And I spent this moment in the dark contemplating also actually a lot about death. And I came out of the cave into a residency in the center of Norway, planning, it was scheduled then to have a cave talk on October 7th into a cave rave. And this cave rave I was doing together with a Palestinian scenographer, a Palestinian artist. So October 7th, we started in the morning to plan the rave. And then my partner started to tell me that I needed to call my father in the morning. And the rest of the day was basically calling friends and family all day. And luckily, there was a very good team around us that day, because there was a need to have a strategy between kind of, actually in that moment, between the Palestinian sonographer and myself. It was a very heightened moment of tension and stress and so many different feelings in the room. So the only thing we were able to was just to understand also how to exist in that space together. And at the same time, I think we were so thrown off that we were also not able to cancel the event. So we actually had a conversation with the audience that evening, and we had a rave. And that, I think, was, I don't really have words. In every moment I was running out and calling my family, and only the next morning we actually got the news about the rave. So that was my October 7th. And sadly enough, the collaboration with my Palestinian partner stranded after that day, and we were not able actually to find back together.
Yeah. Well, we dove right into it. Can you tell us a little bit, Mia, what are you doing as an artist? Just in a short description of what do you do normally?
Normally, I work as a dancer and choreographer in Oslo. And I have worked also together with Iris in Israel many years ago as a co-curator of מחול חדש at הסדרה. And
in Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem, exactly. I work a lot internationally in a lot of collaborations with many different artists. I make work for other dancers, but also together with other dancers and choreographers. And I am busy with working in very different spaces, gallery spaces, outdoor spaces, public space, and stages.
So my name is Ariel Efraim Ashbel. I'm a theater director, so my background is really theater. I was born in Tel Aviv and I started my career in Israel. I studied theater at a place in Jerusalem called the School of Visual Theater. Since 2011, I've been living and working here in Berlin. And I have my own group here. I work in the free field, so I don't work institutionally, but I do have institutional affiliations. And with my group, I collaborate between many different art forms. So the heart is not really theater, but it is performance, where we are always winking towards visual arts and music and dance. When I lived in Israel, I also was involved in the dance field a little bit. I ran a festival in Tmuna Theater for a couple of years called Intima Dance. That's really ancient history by now. And since 2020, from the beginning of the pandemic, I've been frequenting Norway. I've been coming to Norway quite a lot because my boyfriend is Norwegian, my partner is Norwegian, and he's more in between Germany and Norway. And that's how I met Mia. And then we kind of vaguely remembered that we have crossed paths in our previous lifetimes when Mia was in Israel, which none of us really remember, I think. But then the friendship kind of got closer and closer, and that kind of led to Samkome, which we'll talk about later. And it was very interesting and very painful, the way that I learned about the war. And I think it is, in one detail, I think it is very indicative of the experience I've had since. And it was, I opened Instagram, like we all do, and I saw that a friend of mine, or a former friend of mine, who was like a colleague from the free field in Berlin, was posting. And the way that he was posting, and he's a German guy, he's a German-Polish guy. And what he was posting was, remember, resistance is always messy, and we have to remember who is the oppressed and who is the oppressor, and we should always stand with the Palestinians. And then the next story is, all eyes on Gaza, there is a war. So it was like, I was like, oh my God, something happened. So then I tried to look at what happened, and then I realized what was happening. So that was kind of, I think, this kind of shift of perspective. Yeah, it's been indicative of the experience that I've had here communicating with people around me.
Yes.
So that's how I discovered, that's how I found out about it. It was a very painful day, obviously. Just like Mia, I was trying to be as much in touch as I can with my family and with my friends. And I finished the night, actually, I was kind of hiding with another good friend of mine, and I literally hid in her bed. So also in kind of a cave.
How did your work change since then?
Well, it's interesting because at that time, I was in the middle of rehearsals for what will be my biggest show ever, which is a musical. And it's a very Jewish musical. We call it Fiddler, but it is not Fiddler on the Roof. But it takes the dramaturgical structure of Fiddler on the Roof, and it reimagines it as a very, very abstract and experimental form. It was 3 years in the making. And it just happened. Wow. It was a big question mark. How are we going to continue and whether we will continue? And then we decided to continue. I think what happened with that is that the space became a space which could hold grief, and a space that can hold a very, very, it's very cliche to say safe space, but that back then, that's what I needed. We needed safe spaces. So that was a safe space. Work became a safe space.
And relations with your friends or colleagues, were they going through?
I have to say, I am very lucky and I'm very grateful, because what happened is that it was, let's say, no news have presented themselves. Only suspicions became clear. So people who I thought are my friends, but I always felt like, oh, maybe we're not really that close. Or maybe then it kind of showed itself very clearly since the war began. And the opposite was as well. People who I trusted as my family, they showed up. And that was really amazing. Like I felt so embraced and so respected and so seen with my collaborators here. And that includes the institutions, you know. I work regularly. I have three theaters I work with regularly, one here in Berlin, one in Hamburg, and one in Düsseldorf. And all of them were basically just asking me like, what do you need? How can we support you? And that's it.
It's amazing.
It's really beautiful.
Mia, how did your work change since then?
Well, I think first I have to say that I have kind of not been able to dance since then. I felt a bit, I think that the movement left me somehow. So for the first months, I also found that I was really questioning, what is art in this moment? What can art be? Does it at all have a function? What is my place in art? I kind of totally lost interest in dance. I stopped watching performances. Actually, I still don't really go to see performances. Yeah, it's hard for me to find the meaning in it somehow. So actually I would say that I left my work a little bit, and I left the art for a while. And I was really leaning back and questioning, in a Norwegian context, who am I and what role can I be playing in the fact that I do have Israeli family, I am Jewish, I am Norwegian, I have a lot of very close Palestinian friends and collaborators. So where am I needed in a way? And it really took time, also by maneuvering kind of friends and family that are, you know, in a big loss and a big trauma. So slowly I realized that I needed to start from another end, and I started more to work within activist spaces and political spaces, and slowly meeting more people with my background in Norway, forming a group that we call Jewish Voices for Just Peace, which is basically working against the war in Gaza. And then slowly I realized, you know, where can we open space for kind of the soft spaces, or a kind of a meeting, or another kind of sharing. And then I turned more towards the artistic space again. And this was also like coming together with an ongoing conversation that Ariel and I kind of actually started, I guess, on October 4th or something, by coincidence. And then our conversations just in the beginning were just about supporting each other, I think. Like, how do we live through this in this moment together? Like, how can we support each other? What is it to be in Europe in this moment? So many conversations. And slowly I realized that for me, I needed to reformulate some projects that were already planned. There was a project for public space, and I realized that the only way that it can make sense is actually to bring in this moment in time and our conversations from Ariel and I, and really see how is it possible to open a space for grief in this moment across different kind of identities. So this was my way of coming back to art in a way, to open this collaboration with Ariel, and to see how we can actually bring in this moment in time into the work. I have to say that the institutions I collaborate with, I was very transparent with them about the process, and I was really talking them through, kind of inviting them to keep on staying by our side when we reformulated the project into this grieving project that we named Samkome. But I have to say that I think my relationship to both friends and colleagues in this moment in Norway who are not so connected to what's going on. I am kind of staying now in touch and in work with people who are engaged in what's happening. And I'm not able to engage very much with the others. So I kind of really stepped back from the art field. I am just there when I have something to do. And I'm more in touch with the people that are actively engaging in what's happening. And I think this is also a way of protecting myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how did you come to work together on this specific work?
I can say something that for me was very special and very beautiful. Through my work and my personal life, I started to really explore and really be interested in Jewish practices more and more in the last years, in Jewish rituals and practices and so on, which also led me to be even more invested in learning more about my own heritage, which is Yemeni, right? So like I have half of my family, or like I'm not half, I'm fully both, I was told to say. I'm 100% Ashkenazi and 100% Yemenite at the same time. Mia and I both realized that we are in the very specific position of being artists in the performing arts, on the more, let's say, experimental side of the performing arts, both Jewish with Israeli background and also Arab Jewish, which is very specific. It's a very tiny slice of the artistic community of Europe, I would say. So I think on those grounds also we started to talk, and we found out not only we have mutual interest in our family history, but we have a lot of kind of similar sensibilities and also psychological traits, I would say. and as Mia said, the conversation between us started in that around the same time, but not about the war at all. We wanted to talk about some project we might do together in some years, thinking about these questions. And then when the war started, yes. And also we share another thing, that both of us have Norwegian boyfriends. So I felt like for me, we had like a psychological support hotline in the beginning of the war. It was many hours of talking, crying, laughing, and just kind of being there for each other. And then out of that, Mia said, okay, hey, there are these, originally it was 3 different invitations that already existed for Mia's work. She invited me in, and we decided to take those invitations and start to see what they can be. And then in the spring, Mia came with this very concrete invitation, say, hey, I have this project. It's going to happen in Trondheim, which is the middle of Norway, and then later in the year again in Oslo. And I want us to work on it together. And then we met in June of 2024 in a residency for 1 week. It was just the 2 of us. And when we met, when we entered that week, we didn't know actually anything about what this thing will be. So maybe now, Mia, you want to continue about what happened in that week?
So the project itself is actually a kind of a choreographed ritual, kind of a choreographed grieving ritual. And we call it Samkome, which is a word from Old Norse, which means basically gathering. And we invite an audience to meet at a specific moment in a specific place, in a public space. When we did it in Trondheim, the center of Norway, we did it outside of a church. It was a place that we got allocated. And we invite the people who come to form a circle around a bonfire. And through texts about grief, instructions, and singers with different backgrounds, we are basically building into a ritual where everyone in the circle participate. And it's about sharing, writing down a grief. You are willing to let the others hold for you. And later on, the griefs that are written down anonymously on a note, they are read out loud in the circle, in a microphone. So they're kind of amplified in this public space. And throughout, we have singers. Well, in the Trondheim version, we had a Jewish Norwegian singer who was singing in Yiddish. We had a Palestinian Syrian singer who was singing in Arabic. We had a singer from Bosnia. We had a singer from Afghanistan. We had a Norwegian singer. So it's also singers that through their history has a connection to forced migration or to kind of big traumas of actually losing family killed by others. So we invited them to bring a traditional song from their own tradition, a song that they would relate to grieving. So it wasn't necessarily a grieving song. It could be a lullaby. It could be almost a song about love. It could be kind of a praising song, but connected to grieving somehow.
Do people know in advance that they are going to participate in such a ritual?
I think so. In the invitation or how we wrote about the text, the event, it's not published as a show or a performance, but as a gathering. And in the text, it always says that it is participatory, that it is a ritual, and that everyone will take part. You know, Mia and myself, and there are 5 singers, and there are 2 more people who are helping to kind of facilitate the whole thing. We are quite a big team. So when people arrive at the location, we are there kind of communicating, welcoming. So people start to realize that this is a different kind of occasion. So it's more like a social situation rather than a frontal or one-sided performance.
How did you send the message out?
In both cases, it was in the format of a festival. So in both cases, it was the festival website was kind of publishing the event.
Okay, so the institution was a festival.
There was a festival in July in Trondheim, and there was a different festival in October in Oslo.
And what was the difference between the 2 performances or 2 rituals?
What is important for us is that the singers and the team that we invite in, that they're local, that they have a local rooting, and that with with this artistic team comes also kind of different communities from the town, you know. So in Oslo, it was a different combination of singers. For us, it was important that this ritual is about grieving, and that grieving is not measurable, that you can come with the grief you have, and our griefs are not the same. How do we share this moment of difference and of different ways of grieving? So this is important. And inside of that, then also these different communities come. And for us, it was clear that, of course, what is fueling our urgency of doing this ritual is, of course, what is happening now, you know. But we did not want this kind of headline, Israel-Palestine, as a main headline of it. But for us, it was important that in both rituals, both in Trondheim and in Oslo, that there would be the presence of a Jewish singer and a Palestinian singer.
Who were the audience?
There were many people, actually. In both cases,
How many?
We had like around 150 people in each of the iterations. I think
it takes a long time.
But that was the beautiful thing. It's a very literal gesture, right? Like you write down something anonymously, and then you read someone else's grief. Like everyone is writing their own grief. We collect it in a basket.
I see.
And then one of us is going with the basket. So every person who wrote something and put a note is taking a random note of someone else. And reads it out loud. So you become the voice of someone else.
So what kind of people arrived?
I think it was an interesting mix. I mean, the mix was different in the 2 different places because the festivals were different. But I would say in both places, of course, there were artists and there were kind of people that read about it randomly. But in both places, there were also both Palestinians and Israelis. There were pro-Palestinian activists. There were, other kind of Norwegian Jewish people that wanted to be there. And then other people that were, connected to the other singers as well. So it was quite a big mix. And I think this for us was also very important with this ritual. We call it an attempt. And with a question, is it even possible to come together grieving with our different griefs and also identities that are very marked in this moment? And with this comes also that there is a risk. We don't know if, in a way, we as a collective in that moment will be able to or even willing to hold each other's grief for a moment. We actually say that we invite holding difference. We do talk about the patience that it takes. We do talk about the uncomfortability it might come with this. And we also have a part of the text that I think is very important, where we say that some of us here today have family and friends who were killed by others. Some of us standing here today have family and friends who killed each other. Some of us standing here today have family and friends who killed others. Some of us standing here today have family and friends who killed themselves. And this, I think, is a very important part of the text, because already then it's saying that we are here. And if you're willing to still stay in the circle after this, and then we also know that the griefs being formulated come from different places in a way.
Yeah. And you accept this kind of plurality when you stand there. When we started in Trondheim in the first iteration, we did it outside of a church. And that area is where usually you have a soup kitchen for the local community of people who are struggling with addiction. So you have a lot of people who are there all the time, and somehow they became part of it. So people are living on the street, a lot of them, or, don't really have much, and they have a lot of grief. And somehow in this context, grief was really a place of meeting. Like, everyone has very different kinds of grief. So over there, it was these people, and they had their grief, and they were included in this situation. They spoke a lot about suicide. And that's why we added that sentence to the text that Mia reads in the beginning, because we were kind of attentive, or it was really a back and forth between the community and us. And in a similar way, or different but similar, the date, by chance, the date that we got to do it in Oslo was on Yom Kippur. It was the day of Yom Kippur. So then in Oslo, when Mia read the text, which invites people to start to come in, we added that information, that this is a day of atonement, and this is a day of forgiveness, and applying different kind of technologies of amendments and relationships and so on. So it's always sensitive and flexible, but it definitely was, I think, an attempt to be very much here and now, like very concrete, and at the same time as inclusive as possible.
What was the outcome of those two performances? Did you follow up on people that were there? Did you get reactions? Or I wonder, how do you continue to follow this?
Yeah. So actually a part of the ritual that I realize we didn't tell you yet is also that actually after you have read someone else's grief loud, you walk into the center of the circle and burn the piece of paper in the fire, in the bonfire. So this is also this moment of kind of, if we can call it a moment of letting go, or a moment of transformation. And when all the notes have been read, all the 150 notes, there is a kind of, till that moment, there has just been one singer at the time singing. But in the end, after all the notes have been read and burnt in the fire, there is this big musical moment where the singers meet, and there is a kind of a lifting, where the idea is also that there can be this lifting, but also this kind of landing. So this is a very important moment to close it, because of course it's a question, what does it mean that we open and share these things? And in both Trondheim and Oslo, we actually got many notes where people talk about losing people in suicide. In Oslo, someone said that they carry the grief of having been raped and never told anyone. And this is also a moment where we actually think that the circle and the size of the circle plays a role. We don't think this kind of grief would be shared if we were 20 people in the circle. It takes a certain amount of people.
To allow some anonymity.
And in Oslo also, there were actually notes that we understood were vulnerable for the people that were listening to them. And, there were actually people, Palestinians, that write a note about the families that are lost or killed. And then we had notes from the Israeli side, talking about grieving the biggest pogrom since the Second World War. And we understood that for these people, it was actually very difficult to hear the other note.
Yes.
But people stayed. No one left because of something they heard. And in terms of reaction afterwards, we've had quite many reactions. People that thank us after, people that talk about how it stays with them. We also have people that are very angry at what's happening, and they said that it helped them to imagine that there are other people with other realities.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We actually in Trondheim, we also had the director of the Freedom Theatre in Jenin, who was in Trondheim and who was there, and he gave a very interesting reflection that we then took to Oslo, which was, how do we take care of what we open in people? Because he was talking about the moment if you decide for yourself to open a door to your grief, and what if it's a moment where it's actually kind of impossible to close this door. So
what is his name?
Ahmad Tubasi. So this is something that we worked even deeper with in Oslo, is that as we start the ritual, we invite people to really say hello to their neighbor, and to really kind of see their neighbors as a supporter. And in the moment we invite them to write, they can also interact and use the back of the other to write. So in the end, we also really ask people to check in with their neighbor as the ritual is over. So of course, these are small things. There is a certain responsibility we will not be able to take, but we're really trying to look at what does it mean to open, but also what does it mean to close.
I think this kind of leaning towards a healing ritual, or kind of like something which really borders on some kind of a therapeutic thing, it's something which is very new to both of us. I've never done anything like that in my work. You've done stuff in public space, but never with this kind of very explicit healing mechanism somehow. So it's also something that we talked about, like, do we need at the end to even say something like, hey, we are not therapists, or we are not professional mental health people. And if you're struggling, like in many TV programs, we didn't do it eventually, but these were all conversations we've had along the way, because I think for us, even, it was such uncharted territory. And we really, when we stepped in, we didn't know where we're going to end up.
How do you see the bodies of the people that came? Can you describe it choreographically?
Yeah, I mean, what we do in the beginning is that we actually say that this will take time. So if people think that they will need a chair, there are chairs, and we point at where the chairs are, so that actually people have the chance. And also during the ritual, we have helpers from the team on the outside who is kind of keeping an eye and offering chairs a little bit kind of discreetly if they see that it's needed. But it's a very interesting question about the bodies, because I don't know if you agree, Ariel, but there is something in the beginning when you have these kind of eager bodies, we are here to grieve together, there is something very on. And then I think there is a big shift that happens in the moment when the first people start to read, the moment people realize that they have to listen to 150 notes, there is this moment of like, oh, really? And then starts a moment where you see bodies becoming uncomfortable, tired, restless, going through, I think, the waves that we also recognize from some rituals. And then suddenly there is this moment of heightened attention, and then and we got a lot of feedback about this too, actually, that this work of uncomfortability, of tiredness, of being bored. It's a part of ritual, but also people talked about how this is a kind of a labor that they feel comes with not only grieving, but actually thinking about the horrendous things that are ongoing. So there is also a feeling that there is a shift in the group. It's like, this is not comfortable. I don't really want to be here, but I really need to be here. I need to do this.
But I think even if we take another step back, there is something about this uncomfortability and this kind of imperative to have patience for every single person. It's not only in moments of crisis that it is needed, but also it is just one of the building blocks of having a society, of living together with other people, like a choreography of a social togetherness.
How long does it take each note?
Very short.
It's always
one sentence or two sentences maximum.
And then I think it's when you have to do this with 150 people, that's where you suddenly realize that it's a person behind each note, and it meant something for that person. And you yourself have your note and your grief somewhere where someone else has to take the responsibility to carry your kind of message. I think this collective responsibility arises, which is very interesting. So there is also another shift in the kind of, let's say, the choreography, which comes towards the end when you've been standing there alone, you know, reading and listening. And suddenly after the last note has been burnt and the music starts, all the singers starts to sing together and they go into the center, we initiate holding hands. So kind of without words and without instructions, the circle starts to hold hands while this ending is coming. And there is also, I think, a shift, no, Ariel, where you feel that there is a softness, there is a need to connect, and there is something else changes. And I think in this moment, the bodies also kind of fall back into place somehow. It's really this physical heat, I think, also becomes more than that.
Do you participate?
Yes.
Mia is hosting it. Mia is the host.
I'm in a way hosting in the sense that I do the welcome. I invite the people into the circle. I guess it's maybe what we can call some kind of master of ceremony. MC. And I do I do read the long text about grief, which is very important to give the whole ritual a kind of something to stand on. And then I'm the one that reads the instructions throughout the moment. And I have a kind of a partner, which is another person that is standing on the other side of the circle. And she is reading text as well, but she's reading more poetic text. So she's reading poems or kind of through words, doing a little bit what the songs do in another way, which is more to kind of start to play on the emotional string in a way. Because of course, a question Ariel and I had in making this is, how do we quickly make a group of strangers willing to listen to their grief for real and go into this emotional state and share it in public space, which is a very unsafe space. Then we really use the idea of singing, what the power of the voice as one of the main instruments. Of course, the power of talking. How do we talk? The power of the circle as the most ancient form in dance and choreography. The power of the fire, which is not a person. It's alive, and it's kind of something we all know, and it doesn't judge. It's just there. And then, of course, the power of poetry, the poem, and the power of a group, of being together.
I think we also found out that with all of these elements, what really was important is that when Mia is communicating the instructions of what is going to happen now, that was very simple. I think that also was crucial for the thing to flow well.
Originally, I said to the festivals, yes, I will make a piece. And after October 7th, I said, like, it doesn't make sense to call this a piece. We call it a gathering. And the way you would normally, when you make a piece, you would want to invite many programmers and you want to make a dossier, like a project description, you want to sell it and tour it. And this time we were really saying like, what comes, but this is not something that we're going to kind of profit from, let's say it like this, or this is something else. And it's also because we feel that we need it. And then maybe people will find it if they need it, or maybe cities will find it they need it. I think it will have a different way of moving than what the piece would have.
Like Mia was invited to contribute a chapter to a book, which might be published at some point next year about like rituals and so on. We made that into a score. So then even if we, like, let's say if you two think, oh, this could be interesting to do this in Israel, then we can give you the score and then you can do that.
We would like to thank you so much for this conversation, Mia in Oslo and Ariel in Berlin. And we are here in Israel.